So with that in mind, I think we're ready to move. Everybody's got an agenda, Summer? And so we'll kind of move into a discussion of a couple of key issues. And those of you that were here 2 years ago know that we basically had 20 issues that we wanted to get through. We had about 4 hours to do it, and so we were cranking through. We didn't get into a lot of depth with those issues. And I think today, talking to the mayor and Summer, we're thinking more, there's probably 3 or 4 things that have risen to the top for the town that are a little more important for us to spend time with today, and then leaving some time at the end to hit some of those other issues people may have. So with that being said, I think the first one is town liaisons. Is that going to be you, John?
I'm happy to
okay.
kick that discussion off. Council members, and those of you who are newer to the council may not have had to hear me go through this numerous times, but the rest of you, I apologize for having to hear this again. The history of committees, and now we're talking about liaisons potentially instead, among what was the Board of Aldermen. When I first started working with the town, it was the council mayor form of government. You didn't have a town manager, and almost by necessity, I don't know how else you do it, but to divide up the areas of responsibility that the town board had at that point among committees of 2 persons each that did water and sewer and fire, sidewalks, streets and sidewalks and so forth, in that fashion. When you elected to change over to the town manager form, I think that the council kind of, or the Board of Aldermen at that time, kind of took a step back to try to reevaluate where it fit into the committees. I mean, you didn't have a function anymore that required the council, the body, to have a day-to-day function in operation the way that you did before that change. So the question came up, well, do we now reappoint committee members of two members each to go be these functions? And I advised at that time, and I want to emphasize again, that, and if you look in your rules of procedure, rule number 30 talks about committees and boards. It says that the mayor can establish and appoint committees, that any specific laws relating to particular committees and boards shall be followed, and then it talks about following the open meetings law. So the point that I made at that time was a committee under, in my reading of the open meetings law, is that a committee is a public body, and I've given you all the statutes, all the council members have got the statutes in front of you. The definition of a public body includes a committee of whatever city, of whatever unit it's of, if it's one composed of 2 or more members, or 2 exercises, or is authorized to exercise a number of functions, including just a simple advisory function. So the way this reads is, even if the committee is just told to go find out more about this or that and report back to the full council, the best reading of the statute is that committee is still a public body. And so what does that mean? It means that you have to, under subsection D there, have official meetings and keep full and accurate minutes of your meetings, including any closed sessions. Closed sessions, you all, I know, are familiar with. There's just a limited number of reasons that a public body can go into closed session. And then I've given you 143-18.12 about how to notice, and again, I think you're all pretty familiar with what notice of meetings means, that you can establish a regular scheduled meetings, in which case you would just file that with the town clerk. Other meetings that are called for a special reason, you have to give 48 hours notice of. So my reading of that all keys on, you know, a committee is one that is one composed of 2 or more members and 2 exercises some authority. And that's the reason why I've advised the town numerous times that you could consider liaisons. And if a liaison is one member who is appointed to go and have a particular sphere of knowledge that they'll work with town staff on and be aware of, that doesn't implicate all this open meeting stuff. I never said, and I'm not saying I'm never going to say, you can't have committees. You can have them. You would just have to follow the open meetings law, because it's plain as nose on your face that a committee is covered by this and is required to follow the law on it. What I have done since then, though, and the last thing in this little packet I've given you is an email exchange I had with Freddie Bluestein, the School of Government, who takes it a step further and would even say if the liaison becomes part of a staff committee, there's an exemption in the law that says if it's just staff, it's never going to be a public body. Your staff gets to work amongst itself and not have to do all the meeting stuff. Her opinion is if you add a liaison who is a standing member of the council to go to meet with staff groups, then you might ought to treat it like a committee and have all of the hoops and things that I've walked you through about a public body. That's not clear under the reading of the law, and I don't think there's any case that says that. So I mean, I'm still comfortable with the idea that if you appoint a liaison, that's not itself a public body. I think her point is if it gets into a regular pattern of conducting the town's business, you ought to treat it like a committee itself. So if you read what the School of Government's advice is through the current authority, I know you've all seen David Lawrence's book about, or if you haven't, we need to get you a copy of his book. And I think Freda Bluestein has now updated and reissued the Open Meetings Law Bible, so to speak, for the School of Government that walks through all of those issues. She would say even if you go with the liaison model, her advice is treat it like a committee, have a regular set of meetings, keep minutes, and so forth. I don't think, and I really want you to hear me, I have been advising that there at least is this feature of the law to comply with if you name a committee. I don't know that it's really that onerous, and I don't think that if like the Water and Sewer Committee makes a regular once a month meeting and files that with the town clerk, that it's going to be that hard to have your meeting. I mean, the minutes don't have to be verbatim. They're going to be an accounting of what was talked about, and if it's water and sewer, it's basically going to be water and sewer projects. I mean, unless you've got something unusual, in which case those committees, if you name them, probably should avoid any closed session topics and let that be a matter for the whole town council to tackle together. So that's my thoughts about all of them. Happy to answer any questions you've got, but that's been the basis of my advice about what would happen if you name committees and now possibly even just liaisons.
Is that like an officially appointed liaison? I mean, if you just happen to have a conversation with a person on the staff, you don't have to write minutes about it.
You don't. And that, I think it does start with an appointment of the body to even have to worry about it. All of you individually, as long as there isn't a quorum of the council, can get together with whoever you want to and talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's not an official meeting. So yes, Barbara, to answer your question, a single or less than a quorum of the council can talk with whoever you want to, and it's not a meeting.
Jack?
For us newbies on the board here, it would help if I knew, how have you been doing it? What's been the setup and how has that been working? And if we're going to change something, I didn't know what we're changing it from to.
Okay. A little bit of background.
Well, so that's, I think, like I say, when it was the council, the mayor council form of government that didn't have a manager, I think that my understanding of it at the time was that the Board of Aldermen had divided up stuff like water and sewer, streets and sidewalks, police and fire, and said, you're going to be the committee that works on this.
So basically what you'd say is, okay, Joe, you're our water and sewer guy on the board, so anything comes up with water and sewer, we're going to depend on you to give us a recommendation. And Joe then, not Joe particularly.
I know.
But knows everything that's going on in that department and sort of the people who work in that department sort of go through him to get to the board. Is that the way it's been?
Or at least when, and again, it's been a number of years since we really were sure where we were on whether there were committees or liaisons or whatever. But yes, I think when there were committees, they definitely worked with what town staff there was to figure out what things looked like and come back with a recommendation. And on that topic, let me say, I do think there's value, there's definite value, and something that the council really ought to think about doing in having either a committee or liaison member who is somebody you turn to and say, we count on you to give us a better understanding of what is going on with streets and sidewalks. So there's a lot of value in it. It's just, there is this legal hoop to jump through if you do it.
Well, it also gives you employees, they may talk to a liaison or a committee about something, they wouldn't just come here and talk in an open session in a meeting about. I think that's an important thing, and it makes, when there's a discussion going around this table about something, whoever that committee or liaison is, they can look to them and say, well, can you give us a better more in-depth explanation of what's happening.
Well, so one thing to consider with that, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, let me just respond to that briefly. One thing to consider is you've got, it used to be you had the Board of Aldermen, and it had every responsibility for the town directly under it. Now, with a professional manager, everything's supposed to kind of funnel down to manager, and she's supposed to turn and manage everything administratively under that, and she's the one that's answerable to you all about how it's going. You got to be a little bit careful when you do that, not to have that process get circumvented, because things aren't supposed to go straight up to the council.
Mayor?
Yeah, I went back and did a little research, and basically, the board back in December 2013 adopted exactly what John is saying, and it was a rather contentious thing because we were changing completely about the way that we used to do things, and we did adopt that in 2013.
So you went at that point from having more of the
Having two
committees
board
and things.
members, yeah. We had 2 board members, for example, there would be committees of the fire department, what have you. But we did not have a manager then, we had a town administrator.
So,
Wait, in 2013,
Yeah.
we had a manager.
I don't remember whether we did in 2013 or not too. I think we did have a manager, and that's why we went to this, was that we had a manager.
okay.
What did we go to? I mean, what did we go from 2 to 1 or
Yes,
is
in
that what-
2013, it
Okay.
went from 2 to 1.
2 to 1, yeah. And-
Wait, what do you mean 2 to 1?
They had a liaison.
Well, it was,
Okay,
I
gotcha.
don't think we actually called it a liaison, though. That became a real iffy point. We basically said that there was a committee member.
Okay, and Jack and then Joe.
I think I'm on 2 different tracks here. One of them, you have a regular department of the town, water and sewer, for example, and that falls under direct supervision of the town manager. It'd be good to have somebody on the board who was familiar with issues of water and sewer, but they really shouldn't be in a position to try to direct what goes on in that department. That's up to the town manager. Now, on the other hand, we have committees. You have the planning board, you have all these other committees, commissions, and also so forth that operate out there and give recommendations back to this board. I think it's really beneficial to have somebody from the board who can sit there as a non-voting liaison member of that particular committee, so that they can have a pipeline between the board and that committee and vice versa. So it keeps the communications open. But as far as actually operating and directing the activities of a line department of the town under the system that we have now, that falls under the town manager.
Okay. Joe?
I need to protect the prior boards here and the prior councils forever. I started in 97, then became mayor in 03. We always had committees, and the reason I was always told, mainly by Dinah's late husband, Billy, we limited to 2. Could have more, but they always wanted Ed Henson to be able to show up at the meeting and still not worry about whether it was a quorum or not. And so historically it was limited to 2, although under the reading of the public meetings rule was 6 members of the board plus the mayor, then you really could have 3, but not 4. And that was never, ever questioned. We would always have the committee members report, make recommendations, and if somebody voted against them, they'd say, you're voting against the recommendation of the committee. Like that was very forceful. And so, for whatever reason, I'm not sure if I was the mayor in 2013 or it phased out, or whether I was just off the board for 2 years. I don't specifically recall that we did go from 2 to 1. If we did, we did. And why it was, I'm not sure of that. But here's what I sense. I sense that the board wants to get back to committees. Okay. Now, I'm going to go one step further, and I'm not going to get argumentative today. I do not agree. I do not agree with the idea that a committee is such that a 2-person committee would be subject to the open meetings laws. I'm not going to make that the point of it, because that can be something that would be figured out later. But I think the big question is, do we want to go back to have 2-people committees? And I do.
Okay, David?
I echo Jack's sentiment in that we have several boards where we appoint members that there's not a lot of cross-pollination about what they're working on. The planning board, for example, a lot of times, the first time that we ever hear about or know about a planning board's decisions is when it's presented to us in the meeting. I would like to specifically see a liaison, for lack of a better term, to our appointed boards, so that maybe ideas are shared back and forth. There's better communication between us and the boards that we actually appoint.
Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Well, I'll repeat this, and I've brought it up many times. Any member of this council can attend any function of the town whatsoever, anyone, and they can bring it back to the rest of the board. I have never seen the reason to make it a formality to do that when all of the town functions are open to the general public as well as to the council. And I do remember this quite well in 2013 when we did away with these 2 people to a committee, because we felt like that was the job of the manager to do that, but that any town board member could go and sit in on any function of the town whatsoever. But one of the reasoning was by having someone like that, can it give the connotation that you were there somewhat as a spy, or you were there to tell people how to do their job? And it was a very contentious thing, but the board eventually did adopt basically what John has brought before you today.
Okay. David?
But that literally is our job. I mean, as a member of the public, I could just come to this meeting and I could just go to every meeting, but I chose to run for election so that I could help shape and guide the town toward the vision that I wanted to see. So I don't see how just going to meetings as an observer is a good analogy.
Well, here's what I'm getting at. Do you want some kind of authority to do that?
I think some sort of presence where there's some cross-communication between us and the boards that we appoint, and further to water and sewer and fire and police, a channel of communication could only help things. I don't think we're given complete authority where we go and we boss the board around, but some observation, some feedback, this is maybe the direction that we're going, maybe inform the planning board of what we talked about here, if there was a liaison to the planning board. That type of open government, open communication in government can only be good. I mean, I'm accountable to the people who elected me. I want to be able to do my job better by being better informed. I don't see how liaisons or committees or whatever we want to call them to our departments and to our appointed boards could hurt that.
Does your planning board have authority to make final decisions, or does it come back to the town board for?
The planning board is also the board of adjustment.
Okay.
So when it sits as a planning board, it's largely advisory, whatever,
Okay.
functions are assigned other than what's in the law. But, and that's one thing about, and we've talked about, either if there was a committee or liaison of the council to that board, would have to be very careful not to be involved with quasi-judicial things that might come back to the
Right.
council.
Right.
But generally, it's okay. It's not hard to do, I think, because they meet separate times to do those things. It's never hard to figure out, because Justin keeps them on different tracks.
Okay.
For different functions.
I would remind Mr. Culpepper that The role of a council member is to establish policy for the town. That policy is carried out by the people that we employ as department heads and the manager. Our policy is not to go in to either tell people how to do something or to bring back that they're doing wrong any more than any other general member of the public.
Okay. Thank you. Joe?
I'm confused as to what the issue is, Russ.
Well, can I try to restate it as an outsider and see, because I'm trying to figure it out too, judges, for a second. But we've got a little bit, I mean, from a board standpoint, maybe a desire to be more involved in some of the committees, things like that are going on, or even at the staff level to some degree. Is that, and then the danger of that being, you're getting close to practicing without a license, so to speak, and getting into what professional staff do, and maybe overstepping into that a little bit. Am I understanding the rub of kind of where the line is and what we're trying to determine? Is that?
Let's put two and two together here. Maybe we can get closer. Is the issue whether you have all of the water, sewer, the streets, the sidewalks, the different standard committee, but you only have one because you're fearful of having two, would open it up to the public meetings body. So is the issue whether it's just one, for I guess a liaison, or two, for lack of a better word, a committee? Or is it whether we have either one or two or none? What is
A little
the
bit of
issue?
what their goal is being with that group too. Is it as an information sharing and a conduit, or are you getting into?
I mean, are there going to be appointments of either one or two? And that one or two might be dependent, obviously, upon the will of the board. If it was the will of the board in 2013 to go one way, it could be the will of the board in 2020 to go another way. That's just the prerogative of the board. But I'm not sure, am I sensing that there's a desire just to not have any appointments of one or two people to these different historical committees? That's what I'm wondering, is that the
Well,
thought?
if somebody want to answer that, and then we'll get to Ms. Mashburn, who I think had her hand up. Just on the other side of that, it's more staying out of the formalized version of that. Is that what you're allowed to go to meetings, maybe one person can go to those meetings. Mayor, you want to?
Well, I guess I was the new mayor when this came about. And there was great concern because I wanted to try to have town hall meetings. John may remember that. And we wanted to, it got quite contentious, and there was a transition from the mayor council form of government to the more up-to-date, the more adoptive, the more practical way of running a town as we were growing, and that was to go to the manager form of government, which would remove the good old boy politics, that it would remove individual council members going and telling a department head to do this or that, and funneling everything through the manager so that there would be an orderly transition of the policy as sent down to the departments within the town. It was basically a growing thing and becoming more with the best practices of municipal government.
Super. Let me get Ms. Mashburn real quick, John.
Actually, I kind of see several things. I see what you're saying with the boards is different than the committees. But I also think, I wasn't here during when you had the two. I can see times that if we had one or even two that cannot go around, maybe they need to meet with the town manager with the department. I think that is sometimes helpful to her to have some input, but I don't think it's our responsibility to just start showing up at places, but to just be in the kind of the loop, maybe not call it a committee. But I will say, and I know that some of them were here when we had our Essentials of Government, the last one, I specifically asked Freda Bluestein the question. And she looked kind of confused and said, "Are you a mayor, council, town manager?" And I said, "Manager," and she said, "The town manager handles that." I mean, she acted very shocked that that even
Right.
was, so my thing is, whatever we do, it has to directly involve the town manager. That we can't, that we just don't go off on our own doing stuff, that you're always, maybe we assist you if you have meetings, but that's my big thing about it.
Can I get John real quick and then I'll come back?
And that is a nice segue into what I wanted to say, which is just, again, I can't overemphasize, I'm not telling the council that it can't have committees however it feels like it needs to have them assigned. That's eminently doable. There are legal requirements that I think you got to comply with to do that. I think what it should expect to do is to fulfill what will explicitly be an advisory function, that is to advise the council up. We're talking about you should expect to meet with the manager primarily and staff as she deems necessary for you to understand what you need to know to be able to bring a fuller understanding, like David's talking about, to a council meeting. To say, here's why, and it has been very valuable to have times when we've worked through complicated and not real fun to study ordinances, to have a couple of council members who can say, yeah, this is good, here's what we've worked through, here's why we ought to adopt this. So, again, I don't want you to think I'm saying don't do this at all.
Margot?
It seems to me that a committee would be more valuable if it's like particularly task-oriented. For example, when we were looking at sidewalks and trying to figure out a way to prioritize which sidewalk should be repaired and so forth. A couple of us went out with Justin and some others and walked around and looked at the sidewalks actually and came to some kind of an idea amongst all of us about, this one really needs help and this is really bad and yes, we'll help you with this. But on the day-to-day things, I don't know that it's that important. The other thing with the planning board and so forth, I feel like it's sort of a courtesy to these boards to have a liaison appointed to them. I mean, they do a lot of work and don't get much recognition at all. And whenever I do happen to go to a planning board meeting, I get the feeling that they're really appreciative of me being there. And I always learn something also, but that's another reason for doing it for our appointed boards. There's several of them, and I know that it can be a very thankless job, and it's good to know what they're doing. You don't really get that idea unless you actually are there.
Well, and as an outside perspective, I sit on a planning board. I live in Silva. I sit on the planning board there as a citizen, and the mayor comes to the meetings sometimes, and the manager specifically tells her she's not allowed to talk. So she's there to hear and to know what's going on and to show that respect that, look, we value what you're doing, but at the same time, she sent the message that she's not supposed to be driving, they appointed a committee, she's not to be driving what's going on. But just to give, sometimes we serve in a town and we don't know what's going on over the ridge, so just as
I
respect.
think that you're sort of about comparing apples to oranges right there, Mr. McCray, because in one sense, you're talking about the committees, authorities, and boards that the town appoints. On the other hand, we're talking about department heads that are professionals that work for the town. I have been talking about that I feel like it's not quite right to have council members going down to the department heads which we hire to do the job without going through the town manager. I don't think that we need to be appointed to liaisons to town departments. I have no problem with having liaisons to appointed boards. Planning, TDA. Of course, TDA, I don't know about because the state tells us that we can appoint there.
Well, if I may, Bob.
Sure.
I wasn't saying that we should have liaisons to the departments. I was saying if there is a particular task
Right.
that maybe a committee or a liaison could be appointed to help with that particular task.
And we have that now. We have that now, so it's just anybody who wants to go down there and walk sidewalks can do it. Yeah.
Jack, and then I've got a question for you all.
I think I'm getting a better handle on this now. Back in the years gone by, when we didn't have a town manager, we basically said, okay, the mayor pretty much runs the show, and he or she directs what's going on. And they appointed different council members, said, you're in charge of water and sewer, you're in charge of streets, you're in charge of recreation, you're in charge of planning, or you're in charge of finance or whatever. And that's the way they used to do it. But with the advent of the manager manages the day-to-day activities of the town. And that's the departments and their regular activities. And I don't know that we need anyone, or a committee for that matter, to try to go back and do what they used to do when we didn't have a town manager. I think that was what you were trying to get at back in 2013. So we don't need this because we have an administrator to do those things that we were doing ourselves before. But like Barbara and Donald say, I think it's a good idea to have a good connection between the committees that are appointed by this board, because it is very important. And I know I served, and I still serve on other nonprofit committees out there, and we have some of those, two of them that I serve on, we have a liaison from the county. They don't vote, but they're there to let you know, well, what do you think the county would do about something like this, or the city? And so it gives them a little feedback. And then the other one is, well, we're thinking about doing this. Could you take that back and ask the board how they would feel if we went down this path or whatever it is? And so it keeps that line of communications open. You're not telling them what to do. You're not directing their activities,
Right.
but you're a pipeline of communications back and forth between the boards. I think that's very important and useful for committee setups. I don't think it's useful for individual departments of the town for us to be doing that.
So if we blurred the lines slightly on two agenda issues here. So we've got the liaisons down to professional staff and departments, and then we've got this committee issue, somewhat coming out of the same place, but a little different in the way maybe we want to approach them. What's our goal? The liaison issue. What's the goal for today for this group? Like, where do we come out of here? Did we just need more information? Is there a decision that needs to be made? More clarification that we need?
Decision.
Decision.
Because
Okay,
it's been ongoing
okay.
for quite some time.
But
so.
I'm still confused, imagine that, Russ. I'm confused
Okay.
because it was my understanding, now I was the mayor from about midterm. After my 10 years, we went from a council to a manager, so I was right there in the middle. We never changed the committees once we went to the two. It stayed the same my whole time I was there. Now, in my understanding also, and John maybe can help me, there was a thought about going to a, quote, liaison. Instead of water and sewer having two people on the committee, you'd have one person on water and one person on sewer, because that would not be two people and that wouldn't be a public meeting, and there would be no violation. That was what my understanding was as to why it got separated from two down to one.
And that's the basis of my
Okay,
advice.
now I think I am hearing from one or more that really we don't even need one. That everybody can freelance it and go through Summer or our manager. So I think the question of the board is, do we like to have appointments? And if so, is it one person or two people? Knowing if it's two, there might be that issue of public meetings that we would go through. But I mean, that's where I'm trying to figure out what her question is.
Okay. And Mike, you've been waiting.
Well, for 12 years, I've sat in this boardroom, in the county commissioner boardroom, when I worked for the newspaper. And I can tell you the biggest benefit, from my perspective, not sitting here, but sitting out here, over those 12 years, the biggest benefit of liaison is their inside knowledge. When there's something going on, everybody around that table can look and say, well, let's say fire, for instance, they need to buy some piece of equipment, and everybody around the table says, we just bought that last year. Well, whoever that fire department liaison can sit there and say, well, look, they're under regulations. This stuff has an expiration date. They have to buy this every month. It's the inside knowledge that that person provides is what the biggest benefit of that is, in my perspective, over watching that as an observer for over 12 years. And the reality of the situation is, liaison or not, if somebody in a department, I mean, we can sit here and act like it's not going to happen, but you're going to get a phone call, whether it you know, no offense to Summer, but if you know as well as I do, somebody's gonna call one of us with an issue. I mean, it's gonna happen. So whether there's an official structure for that or not, it may be unsolicited by us, but we're at some point, somebody is gonna reach out or say something or whatever. I mean, that's gonna happen. It'd be silly to sit here and act like I think it's not, because it will at some point, but to somebody or however multiple people, but it will happen.
Okay. David?
I think my goal of the day, because this has been an ongoing issue for the 2 years I've been on the board, is for us to have a list, an actual piece of paper that listed our departments and assigned us one or two, it matters not to me, what we're supposed to do, what board we're on. And the secondary part of that is we need to decide, do we want to have a liaison to the planning board, to the TDA, to the ABC board?
Let's keep the boards separate from the
Okay.
departments, just for a minute.
Fair enough.
If for nothing else, so that I can get my head around the issue a little bit.
So a list that actually says what department we want a liaison to and a person's name
So
beside
you
that.
guys are gonna, the elected board is gonna get, sounds like you're saying get involved in day-to-day operations of your professional staff.
That's not what I'm saying. But let's say I'm the fire liaison, which I don't think I am at this point, and Tim has an issue that he wants to talk about, or Summer has an issue that she just wants to have a sounding board to bounce off of. The fire liaison could meet with Tim, meet with Summer, and you could say, hey, you know, this is something we got going on. What do you think? That type of soundboarding off of each other is not just invaluable, I think it's necessary to help a town function properly.
So, please.
Okay. So just from a management standpoint, from my position with the town, I actually do appreciate having the sounding board, where if it is a rec issue with the JC Park, or if it's something with fire or police, I, as your manager, can go to a specific council member and we can research it. I'm okay and open for that, and it does go back in 2013. That's where we tried to get it, going back to John, to go from 2 committees to 1, to where you just had a liaison. So really that liaison could work with the manager, and the manager could then bring the staff up from that department. From management standpoint, I'm okay with that. That's a benefit for all. The only concern, and I don't think this is where we're going, so I just want to clarify, is day to day. I think what we've been doing has been working because it allows me to reach out to Dinah to work on an issue, and whoever I need to bring up from staff can meet with me and do that. I think that works.
And that's what I raised my hand to say, if you work in conjunction with you, and if you get a phone call, then you can talk about it, but not in the day-to-day, just dabbling in.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger, and just for me trying to get my head around it, and I'm not even, I'm here to facilitate the conversation, and I start to get uncomfortable with that concept. I mean, you've got professional staff in place, and if the board starts going past your professional staff or past your manager to get the professional staff, I don't think that's the goal. You've moved to this point. I don't think going back there is necessarily where you want to be.
It seems like, just kind of clarification, there's a typical flow chart that comes down through.
Right.
And, from, I guess, the council or mayor, council, I'm not sure how it breaks down, but then to Summers, our manager, and being, as one of those department guys, it sounds like we're wanting to circumvent that and come back this way, which that's my direct, that's who I go to when I need something. I don't want to,
No.
that
You
we
can't.
have the chart in place
You
for
can't.
that reason. We don't need to go
No,
do that.
that puts you in an awful.
Yeah, we need, there's a reason it's, these levels are there.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. It is, you have an hourglass shape now in the way that things are supposed to flow. And that, and to Mike's point, you are going to get calls as council members, and you got to have the discipline to say, I'm not going to go to a department and change anything for you. I'll refer it to our manager, and it'll get taken care of appropriately. I think you all do a good job of that. There's really been, for as big an adjustment as it was to change your whole way of doing business back then, the council members have always been very good not to do any end runs around anything. So I don't, I think as long as we understand that.
Mayor and then Joe. Okay,
I'm listening.
okay, Joe.
I think I'm getting there. I think it sounds like now that there is consensus of a representative from the board working through the manager, okay? The question is it a representative of one or a committee of two? If it was a committee of two or representative of one, they would still work through the manager. I think committees, among other things, promote teamwork, and they promote the ability to get together and interact when other times there wouldn't be. If it was still going through the manager and not ad hoc, so to speak, then that's where I fall out on.
Jack, next.
If I understand it, this is all came from the fact that we had two people who were on the board or on a committee. And so I think the question, if I understand it, is anytime the board appoints a committee of two or more members, it qualifies as a public committee and is subject to the open meetings law. If you have one person on the board who says, okay, I want Donna to be our go-to person in case any questions come up about water. Well, that's not a committee.
Right.
That's just somebody who has an interest and an expertise in a particular subject. And it could be water, it could be sewer, it could be law enforcement, it could be public safety, it could be whatever it might be if somebody has an interest in that. But whether it's water and sewer or any of the other thing, if I understand it correctly, if you appoint more than one person to be the, whatever you want to call them, expert or liaison or whatever to that particular area of the town's operation, then it qualifies as subject to the open meetings law.
Which is not overly
That's what
complicated,
and I think
right?
that's what John was trying to get to, wasn't it, John? Is that we want to avoid conflicts where it could be interpreted as a violation of the open meetings law. You don't have that if you have one person doing that. And as Summer says, it's a resource for her to have somebody who has an interest in a particular area and knows a lot about that, to be a sounding board or bounce ideas off of it and help her make her decisions, not to go in and try to tell her what to do about a particular department.
Yeah, and if you feel strongly about two, there's a way to do that.
Yes, or have two-person committees and just comply with the open meetings law. And I really don't think it's going to be in the end analysis that onerous to do.
No. Mayor?
Well, I guess the question that I have after listening to this is why do we need to change? What is the advantage in making the change when anybody right now can perform any of these things that you're talking about doing by being a liaison? There is nothing when the guys are down there digging a ditch and it's pouring rain and lightning would keep you from getting out of your car and sitting down there and hearing what's going on. There's nothing to prevent anybody. There's nothing to prevent any council member from helping set up cones and all for parades. There is nothing that would prevent any council member from helping pick up trash and working with our employees instead of going down there as a liaison, which carries a connotation of I'm sort of a sub-boss.
Is there a power differential when you go from one to two? I mean, can two people drive things more? Is there a concern there? I mean, why?
Sounds like if you're gonna have a liaison or a contact person, they need to limit it to one person per area.
Yes, I'll concede that.
So how many areas are we talking about in all?
I don't know.
6?
Water,
5?
sewer, streets, fire, police, and I don't know if we have anything like town staff, but 5.
Joe may remember best than anybody here, wasn't it? Water and sewers,
Water
streets
and
and
sewer.
sidewalks,
Police, fire,
recreation, police and fire
Public
together. I
Works.
think, we're-
And recreation.
Recreation.
Police, fire, liaison makes, to me, liaison meaning one person, kind of makes sense. Water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, those are different animals. A lot of times with water and sewer, you've got projects going on, and it would be very valuable to have representatives of the board to attend meetings with the engineers and all such as that. That lends itself to two people. Lord, Billy and Jerry would just ate it up. They would go and they would, get together and they were that subcommittee team. For those, and then streets and sidewalks have a whole separate, because those are projects. Police and fire are more, departments. So some areas lend themselves more to committees and some lend themselves equally as well to liaisons. So I'm getting there a little bit towards the middle.
Barbara, you.
Well, I was just thinking there's 6 of us and the mayor, so, and then if you have 2 people on every department and then 2 people at the planning board or 1 person, it gets to be an awful lot of obligations, and, which is fine, but people should be aware of that.
So we're at 45 minutes on this conversation right now. And that's not a good or a bad thing, but that's to say, what new information do we need? What clarifications do we need? And if we're good with those things, what steps are we taking to move on in this
We're
conversation?
at 5 years and 45
Yes.
minutes.
Right.
Is there further clarification or something that hadn't been said that needs to be said?
It's basically, if I could throw this in, basically if we appoint a committee of 2 or more people, then that's subject to the open meetings law, no matter what committee it is, period. So the other question I would have then is, if it's working and it's a benefit to the town manager, I don't have any reason to change that except because of the open meetings law. The other question I had is, how do I go about appointing people to be these liaisons?
Are you going to introduce a new question, Jack? We can't.
How do you do that anyway?
Right. Summer.
Maybe can address some of that, and then just maybe as a tangible action item for next month for our March meeting, what would be the kind of consensus of the board if, a couple months ago, we put in the different departments, police, fire, and I know Mayor Scott, I don't know if he may or may not have sent out to let you know what you're interested in serving on. And then maybe at our March meeting, we could make those liaison appointments to have someone that's the police liaison, someone that's the fire liaison, someone that's water and sewer liaison.
Can I ask you can I ask? So what are the duties now? Let's say I am now the police liaison. Do I go down and announce myself and say, okay, here I am?
Summer.
A great example of where it's beneficial to have like a police liaison for our case as staff is you're just now getting ready to go through hiring of a new police chief. So it's nice, I know Jack has offered to help on that, it's nice to have your manager and HR on something like that, be able to have a board member sit in on that. Same thing with fire. I know Dinah and I've worked together on some fire projects that she's been interested in. It's more project and circumstance as opposed to day-to-day operations. Or if there's something at JC Park that Mr. Collins is aware of, him and I'll work together to obtain that goal.
So is it more a matter of waiting until you're called on to do something than
Or if
going
you
out and
have something you
volunteering?
ain't done. Or if you have something you want done.
Then talk to you,
Mhm.
and then,
Let me ask, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in here again. What if I'm appointed as the liaison to fire, but I happen to be down and I see something at the police department, and somebody says, or I'm looking at something, I have to say, I'm sorry, but I'm liaison to fire. Whereas right now, we're all in the boat together. And I just don't see why we want to partition what we can and can't go down, listen to, take part in. I try to go out on the major fire calls, not to fight fire, but to be there in case there's anything that I possibly could do, or any other department. And every council member sitting around this table has the same ability and the same right to do that without being formalized as a liaison.
Joe.
Don't we have liaisons now? So we do have them now. Right. So we're not everybody floating around free agency. We have liaisons now. I'm willing to come halfway in this. The water, sewer, and streets and sidewalks lend themselves, I've got 20 years on this board, they lend themselves to two-people committees.
Help me understand again, why?
Because those deal with more like projects, long-term visions, grants coming in, and working with things. They just lend themselves to working with somebody on the board in that capacity. It worked well, it always worked well, and I was the hybrid in between. We went from the manager to the, from the
Well, what do two-
administrator to the manager.
I guess I don't understand what two people do that one don't in that situation.
They communicate. They get together for a common little cause.
They
And
have
it
their
adds
little meetings.
one.
And they represent different interests. I mean, I may see the 6, Joe may see the 9. If we're both on the sidewalk committee together, there's some dialogue there.
Whose job is sidewalks? No, I mean, whose job is sidewalks? Does that come on?
Streets department.
Streets. But just remember, if you do that, you gotta post a notice and let
Thank
the media know that you're gonna have a meeting whenever it is. And we probably have not been doing that, have we?
Done it for 20 years, and I don't think you have to do it now, but
I'm saying,
Well-
the attorney, and you're an attorney too,
Mhm.
the attorney who has been backed up by the school of government says if you have a committee of 2 or more people appointed by the board, it's subject to the open meetings law.
And that's probably in the interest of professional expertise, that's what you got to, I mean, if that's what your attorney says, that's what you go with.
Well, this is a different time and a different town than it was 20 years ago. Entirely different. Every best practices has changed with municipal government since those days of your town administrator. What would, if we have these liaisons, and it's kind of a formal designation, how do we keep that liaison from undermining the department head?
Because it sounds like that's the discussion, right? Liaison
It's
is
a whole
kind of a
discussion.
content expert that understands that department a little better and can be a liaison between the board and the department. We get into a
Has to go
committee,
through the manager.
we're talking about developing projects and giving direction as a committee, and that's a little different animal than a liaison. Is that where our line is?
Well, just because we're a municipality does not mean that we don't have a chain of command.
We are what stops that, because that will inevitably happen. That happens, and even though we don't have liaisons, but I've seen you call people out before in meetings for maybe overstepping their bounds or saying something that you thought was possibly off color. So I think we're the stopgap measure for that. If I run wild with the sewer department and start telling them how to do things, I would expect blowback from you and the rest of the board and the manager. So it's somewhat of a self-regulating measure to where if anybody's just going off on that department, there's ways to mitigate it.
I would, with all due respect, I would say I would trust my processes to do that, not people all the time. I mean, we don't do that, and I don't want to weigh into this argument too much.
Yeah.
It's not my, but yeah, I mean, we want the processes there that tell us what we need to do, and we can lean on the processes. And as people, David, you may have but who knows who's on this board in 2 years, right?
We are the process, though. We are a fluctuating elected
Well-
process.
I don't know what we've been called, but we've been something as a representative between all of these, fire, police, all those things. It has appeared to work well, and we have not went around our powers that I've noticed. I don't know why we need to change what we've got currently in place. Just like when I came on, I got water and sewer because of Billy. That did not mean I knew anything about water and sewer, but.
You probably know more now than you ever wanted to know about what it is.
But I just think what we've had, whatever we are called, has worked well. That's all I'm saying.
If I could add one last thing too. There is, with one liaison to each thing, your water and sewer as a duality becomes 2 members because you have a water and you have a sewer. If you have a streets liaison and a sidewalks liaison, if both are needed, it then does become a two-person liaison with activity. So there is a way that a one formally appointed liaison where we know what we're supposed to do could achieve what everybody at this board, I think, wants.
So what do we want to, what's the goal right now?
Can I add something real quick? And I hope I'm not stepping out of turn here. I'm a little bit like Joe. At the beginning of this conversation, I was a little confused. But as the interim chief, as a current sitting department head, in light of what all's been said, I would welcome at least one liaison. And I personally would like to see a statement of one liaison per department for a couple of reasons. We talked about the structure. Mr. Walden talked about the structure just a few minutes ago. We've got to respect Summer's position as the boss. I get that. And if it's a day-to-day necessity or a need or something that I need an immediate answer on, I'm going to keep Summer informed, and I'm going to go to Summer as my contact person because she is my ultimate boss. If it's an issue, maybe something I'm looking at long-term, that I want to bounce some ideas around, then I would gladly go to my liaison and keep a close communication with them. What do you think about this as an outside opinion? Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Is this feasible? Is it not feasible? So I welcome that part of it. I would also welcome any board member here, as long as I'm the chief, you're welcome to come to the PD and look around and talk and see what we do, hear what we do, and get a better understanding of what we do. That's great. If we decide to go with liaisons, I would also ask that we respect that structure in the liaison as well as we do with Summer. The liaison should work with the department head and not allow each department member to call and complain about their own personal opinions and agendas. And if that starts happening, my wish would be for the liaison to shut that down and say, hey, go talk to your supervisor.
Yep.
He can go talk to his supervisor, and if you guys can't settle it, then your department head will come to me and I will intervene. If need be, then we will involve the manager as well. But I like that structure, and I like that outside opinion, but I also understand that Summer is the ultimate boss here as well. So,
Thank
for
you.
what it's worth from a department head
No, I think that perspective is
that's
useful in this conversation. Thank you.
I have one thing that I want to mention to the council, is that every one of you have an obligation to learn about every department in this town. And you can do that by going and visiting. Someone instigated a program which has been very successful, and I know that several of you have taken advantage of it, where she gets you and takes you to every department and see what's going on. Don't get the opinion that because you are I started to say liability, the liaison to a department, that you should not be familiar with how every department in this town operates, from finance to water and sewer, everything. It's a complicated game, and it's a whole lot different than it was 20, 30 years ago. And it's going to get worse.
Mhm. So what step are we taking this
That would be up to this council to decide.
summer? Maybe.
I would like just to, and get the council's thought on it, because this is something that we've batted around for 3 months now, looking just at the liaison side of it. What we would like to do is maybe at your March meeting again, have a list for you guys to see what liaison positions are out there, and informally or formally assign you that position to where you and I can start working together. Now, if we want to, after this discussion, circle back, because I know that has been a discussion for 2 years about outside appointments to boards, I think we could tackle that separately. But at least from administration standpoint and department's head standpoint, it'd be nice to have something by our next council meeting so we're all kind of on the same page.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I think we do need to look at the other outside agencies and see if we want any communication or improved communication with those by a member of the board being a liaison or a connection for that. And I think that would be a good idea to do that. And the only difference is if we have two people on a committee, quote, a committee, then we gotta be subject to the open meetings law. That's what brought all this about, I think. But right now, the way I think we've gotten around that is to say, well, we don't have a two-person water and sewer committee. We got a person on the sewer committee, and we got a person on the water committee. And every once in a while, the representative from this committee will meet with a representative from that committee, and so they're not subject to the open meetings law. Is that right, John?
Yes.
And there's nothing illegal about that.
Correct.
And it's working right now, is it?
It's working very well.
And we're not breaking the law. Donna says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Is that a motion?
Do we make motions in this meeting?
Well, no. But I think we have a plan going forward for the March meeting.
I'll be glad to bring that forward.
If,
Thank you, guys.
if we can live with that from a consensus standpoint, you know, if everybody's all right living with that for that meeting.
Turn to that.
A decision was made.
A decision is made. Okay,
So we take a break.
I'd say we do too.
Before we
Okay.
move on.
How about that?
If the next one takes this long, it'll be.
Yeah, I know it.
So, 5 minutes? And